All right, it's Jim here. Look, in this video, we're going to talk about egress windows. They're really important, especially when you're finishing basements. And so you want to stay tuned, take some good notes on this, because if you're looking at finishing a basement and putting a bedroom in it, you need to know this stuff. So when you're finishing a basement, let's face it, I mean, we all have houses or have been in houses where they have very narrow windows. You know, you couldn't get, a hamster outside of them. You never mind trying to get a human being outside. So we need to really consider the size of the windows. So with code in Ontario, where we're developing or filming these videos, the code is 3.8 square feet. That's what the window opening needs to be, with no opening less than 15 inches. So it gives you, an option to put a slider window in. So as long as you've got that at least 15 inches minimum in there when that window is open, you can use that. The other thing that works really well are these awning type windows that I'm going to show you in a second. But it's really important that you consider this. Don't cheap out and just think, oh, I'm going to finish a bedroom, I'll sneak a bedroom in my basement. You want to really consider if something happens and somebody can't get up those stairs, or they're too big to fit out of those narrow windows, because remember, when homes are built, especially new homes, they only have to have a minimum of natural light coming into a room space. So when it's unfinished, they don't have to be very big. All right, have a look at this window. This is typically what we get in basements, right? Something about 10, 11 inches high by about 32 inches wide. I mean, you're not going to get a body outside of that. I mean, I'm pretty slim. I'm not going to get out of that without a struggle. And so that's exactly why we want to have proper egress windows, because you don't want to be caught in a scenario where in the middle of the night you got to try to sneak out of that. So that's the whole reason why we talk about egress and having a proper window in a basement, especially if you got a finished space where somebody's sleeping and living down here. Point out the size of those windows and think about that. In the middle of the night, emergency happens, you got to try to get out that window. Consider how you're going to do that, how you're going to get yourself out. That's why it's so important to have those egress windows where you've got that full 3.8 square feet, where you got a lot more room to get yourself out of, easier to get out of. The maximum height for those egress windows is 3 feet, so you may have to put a platform in front of that, which we will in this house, and that's going to give you a lot easier way to get out in case of emergency. So consider that. That's typically what we get in basements these days. That's not going to help you to get out in an emergency. So consider that when you're finishing off your space. I remember I had a client that was renting out a house to students, and he wanted to put 2 bedrooms in the basement. And I said, look, the first thing you need to do is you got to get an egress window. And he hooed and hawed about it. And I said, look, if you're not going to do it, I'm walking away, because there's just no way that you can have students living in that basement and not have a proper way for them to get out if there's an emergency. So remember, 3.8 square feet is the minimum, and no opening less than 15 inches. So like I said, the awning style are great. I mean, I've done them in the past where they lift up and then they kind of lock in place. The whole idea is you want to have access or a way for somebody to egress if they have to carry a child or an animal or something in their hand. They want to be able to operate that, open the window and get the screen off with one hand so that they can get themselves out. That's the whole idea of it. So the ones that I used to put in there, where they were awning style, they used to lift up and lock in place, then you just push the screen off and out you go. These newer ones are just great. They're more like a barn door style one, where you just open them up. I mean, how simple is that? And you just push that screen. You can lift this and push it out, pull it out, but you can just push that off with your hand. It's got an extra deep window well in here. So if it's just a basement in a residential home, you can get away with a 24-inch deep window well. So it gives you enough space to crawl out of that and up. If it's an apartment, then it has to be a little bit bigger. It has to be 39 inches so that you can get out and almost stand in that whole area. So really, you got to check the code. The application is different in different areas or different scenarios. But the whole idea of this is, isn't that great? Just open it up with one hand and out you go. It gives in great light as well. In this case, we got it covered up top because we're doing some deck work outside. But if that's open, then you got some great light coming into the room as well. We put them into basement apartments, and they really do add a good feature. Not only do you have a safe window, a means of egress, but it gives you great light coming into the room. It just gives some added features. So it's something to really consider when you're finishing off a basement, especially if you're putting a bedroom in it. And don't be one of these people that say, oh, I'm just finishing the basement and this is just an office. and then sneak a bed in afterwards. I mean, there's no sense in sneaking that stuff. You don't want that liability. You don't want that concern in your hands. So do it right. Make sure you look at it. There's lots of companies that will come in to actually do these when the basement is finished. You know, so even if you've got a finished basement and you don't have proper egress, don't think that you're limited. Don't think it's going to be a real sloppy mess. There's companies that will come in and that's all they do is just do these egress windows, and they'll do them after the fact. I mean, we do them before, you know, construction's going on, but it's still an option. There's always a room to do that. So remember, egress is an important thing to do, important consideration when you have a bedroom in a lower level of a basement. Make sure you got a proper window in there, and everybody can sleep good at night.